You must have heard the saying, when America sneezes, the whole world catches a cold. This is because America has a significant influence on global affairs. The world is interconnected, and due to its economic and military might, America is a dominant player on the world stage. Therefore, any disruption in the US is felt across the globe. Something similar is happening now. America's decisions have triggered upheaval in the global economy. Donald Trump's so-called beautiful tariffs have beautifully painted global stock markets red. Not just the US, but China, Russia, Japan, every major economy's stock markets are witnessing a bloodbath. First, Trump imposed a 10% baseline tariff on all US imports. Then he imposed additional tariffs targeting specific countries, 26% on some, 46%, and even 104% on some others. These tariffs were imposed at the discretion of the US, sparing no one, not even key trading partners and allies. In response, countries like China and Canada imposed retaliatory tariffs on US goods. The European Union is also taking retaliatory measures.
Russia is exempt from the latest steep tariffs list, but it is also facing the impact of Trump's policies. Due to panic in the international market, oil prices have fallen, along with stocks and other commodities. Now oil is Russia's key export item, and the drop in oil prices will hit the Russian economy hard. On the one hand, Russia is worried about falling revenue. On the other hand, Trump is celebrating the falling oil prices and saying, "Look, there is no inflation." Meanwhile, analysts who actually understand economics have started warning about the threat of a global recession. Historical comparisons are being made. Trump's tariffs are being described as the steepest tariff hike since 1930. What happened in 1930? The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act came, which is believed to have deepened the Great Depression. Cut to present, the impact on global stock markets due to Trump's tariffs suggests that history may be repeating itself. Yet, even after all this, Trump does not want to change his policy. He has already warned Americans about the economic difficulties to come and said that they should be ready for long-term gain after short-term pain.
Trump's tariff and the retaliation by affected countries have greatly increased the threat of a global trade war. This is panicking investors, and stock markets across the world are collapsing. Trillions of dollars have been wiped out from US markets since Trump's inauguration. Production costs for businesses have increased. They are suffering. Global supply chains are being disrupted. International trade relations are becoming strained, and market volatility is rising. The fear of a global recession is looming. According to Goldman Sachs, the possibility of US entering a recession within the next year has reached 45%. The Nasdaq and Dow Jones are continuously declining. Due to this evaporation of hard-earned money, protests have also begun against Trump in the US. Social media is flooded with memes and trolling. However, Trump seems unaffected by all of this. While defending his decisions, he has said that these tariffs are like necessary medicine. They may cause some difficulty now, but should be endured because the results will be historic.
However, economists believe that Trump's policies could lead to stagflation, a situation characterized by low growth and high inflation. Businesses that rely on imports will see their production costs increase as imports will become more expensive due to tariffs, and they will pass on these costs to consumers, thus increasing inflation. As things become more expensive, people will spend less, demand will fall, companies will have to reduce production, investments will decline, job cuts will follow, and overall growth will slow down. Retaliatory measures by other countries will further impact the US economy. Therefore, these sweeping tariff measures are not sustainable. Trump's advisor, Elon Musk, has already said that he wants to see a zero tariff situation between the US and Europe. Obviously, Musk does not want a prolonged trade war, as it would hurt his businesses too. His companies like Tesla and SpaceX depend on international suppliers for critical components. As a result, they would also suffer losses due to disruptions in global supply chains. Moreover, his personal wealth has shrunk due to the stock market decline. Then, retaliatory tariffs will also complicate his startling expansion plans in foreign markets. Clearly, global trade wars are not good for his business interests. Keeping this in mind, Musk is likely to advise Trump accordingly. He may leverage his influence over Trump and lobby to change the aggressive tariff approach. Thus, there will be additional pressure on Trump from the entire business community, including Musk.
The rest of the countries, which have so far shown restraint and have not yet retaliated against the US tariffs, are currently trying to negotiate with America. But if things continue like this for long, their approach could also change soon. When stock markets keep crashing like this, it won't take long for the sentiments of these countries to shift. Trump will not be able to follow this tariff strategy for much longer. The huge sell-off being seen in the US stock markets is also increasing the pressure on him. His aggressive tariff strategy reflects how frustrated he is with unequal market access. But such poorly thought out implementation will worsen the situation instead of improving it. Yes, the US government may raise billions of dollars in the short term through tariffs, but this money will ultimately come from US consumers. Moreover, the kind of uncertainty created in the market now that America is facing reduced demand along with supply side shocks will make it very difficult for businesses to adapt. This will build pressure on the Trump administration, and eventually he may have to abandon his rigid plan. It remains to be seen how much damage will be caused to the global economy by then. At present, Trump doesn't appear to be backtracking. He threatened China, saying that if it doesn't remove the retaliatory tariffs on the US, then the US will impose an additional 50% tariff. He also stated that trade talks with China would be terminated. And that's exactly what happened. Until last month, the US used to impose a 10% tariff on China. Then after Liberation Day, a 10% baseline tariff plus an additional 34% tariff was imposed, bringing the total to 54%. Now after the additional 50% tariffs, the total tariffs on China have reached 104%. Obviously, China won't remain silent after this. So this clearly indicates a US-China trade war and severe damage to the global economy.
To prevent this from happening, more than 50 countries have reached out to Trump for negotiations. For example, trade negotiations are ongoing between Japan and the US. Similarly, India is engaged in making a trade deal with the US and is showing its willingness to open up its trade. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu immediately went to the White House to meet Trump. The US has imposed 17% tariffs even on its key ally, Israel. Netanyahu, who cannot afford any further damage to the Israeli economy at this time, flew to the US and assured Trump that Israel would reduce its trade deficit with the US. Trump is justifying his actions by promoting small victories like this. But history shows that such sweeping measures cause significant economic damage. Trump, who enjoys considerable support in the US, will gradually lose domestic backing as financial distress in the country increases. At the end of the day, when a cost of living crisis arises and survival becomes difficult, ideology goes out of the window. The charisma of a political leader works only up to a certain point. When the tolerance level for economic pain is breached, even the most loyal supporters do not hesitate to turn against their popular leader. So, Trump will be able to continue this self-inflicted economic damage only for a limited time. After that, concessions and negotiations will have to take place.
By the way, Trump keeps giving signals from time to time that he's ready to reduce tariffs in exchange for certain concessions. For example, if China agrees to the TikTok deal, Trump has said he could offer some relief on tariffs. So the US is using tariffs as a tool. Through these tariffs, it is trying to secure favorable deals for itself. Many countries are also trying to reach out to Trump. It has become like a game where it remains to be seen who will blink first. However, it is not necessary that all countries will bow down to the US. If other countries like China also retaliate, it could have a very negative impact on global trade. Talking about India, the impact of Trump's policies on India's stock market has been relatively limited compared to other major economies. This is because India is not heavily dependent on the US for its exports. Secondly, India is proactively adjusting its policies to mitigate trade tensions. India also has strategic diplomatic relations with the US, and since it does not have a significant trade surplus with the US, as China has with the US, Trump has imposed relatively lower tariffs on India.
India is subject to 26% tariffs, while Bangladesh faces 37%, Vietnam 46%, and China 104% tariffs. Last year, China's trade surplus with the US was over $300 billion, whereas India's trade surplus with the US was just $37 billion. So, China is bearing the brunt of the tariffs more heavily, and for now, the impact of Trump's trade policies on the Indian economy is relatively less. Further, as steep tariffs are imposed on China and other Asian countries, global supply chains will be redirected towards India. India will emerge as the best alternative. Lower tariffs will give Indian manufacturers a competitive advantage. On the other hand, China is truly at the receiving end. First, there are 104% tariffs, and on top of that, there are heavy tariffs on countries like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Indonesia, nations where China has established manufacturing facilities due to the availability of cheap labor. Chinese companies relocated to these countries to avoid existing US tariffs. Instead of manufacturing in China and exporting to the US, they shifted production to these countries and exported from there to the US. In this way, they bypassed US tariffs by rerouting exports. But now, Trump has imposed heavy tariffs on these countries as well. In doing so, he has targeted China's extended supply chain and made it almost impossible for China to bypass US tariffs. This has laid the groundwork for a clash between the world's two biggest economies.
China has reacted strongly, stating that it will give a befitting reply to US blackmail and will protect its interests at all costs. If this is what the US wants, then so be it. China will fight till the end. It will deliver an appropriate response to Trump's unilateral punitive tariffs, and tit-for-tat retaliation is coming from China's side. China's filing of a complaint against the US at the WTO due to the weaponization of tariffs and restrictions on rare earth metal exports will further increase challenges for the US. Unlike Trump, Xi Jinping does not face internal opposition in his country. The Chinese Communist Party has already addressed these challenges. But Trump, who governs a democratic country, will have to deal with protests. Unlike Xi Jinping, Trump does not have that level of control over the public. Then China's domestic consumption market is very large. So in the event of a trade war, if Chinese exports fall, some of those goods can be absorbed domestically. The rest may be dumped in other countries by devaluing the Chinese currency. China is not backing down either, but due to economic pressure, it is considering reviving trade talks with US allies, Japan and South Korea. This means that in a trade war, China is more likely to endure longer than the US. A prolonged trade war will be tougher for the US. However, other countries are not as strong as China and may not be able to withstand US pressure in the same way. Therefore, they are adopting a more conciliatory approach instead of retaliating.
For instance, Taiwan reached out to the US after the imposition of 32% tariffs. It has requested the US for trade talks. Taiwan has even offered to impose zero tariffs and is willing to remove trade barriers. Taiwan, whose existence is under Chinese threat, would absolutely not want any kind of negative impact on its economy. Vietnam has also agreed to reduce tariffs on US goods and has shown a willingness to purchase more US goods to prevent the trade crisis. And this is exactly what Trump wants: countries responding in this way to US tariffs, requesting negotiations and being willing to make concessions. However, it is not necessary that all countries will do this. The US should also keep in mind that there are political compulsions in every country. It is quite possible that more political leaders, under immense pressure, may give unexpected responses to the US in order to protect their national pride. They might start retaliating. Until now, Trump has been defending his aggressive trade strategy by saying that he wants to put America in a better position in the global trade order through his beautiful tariffs. He wants to restore American wealth and strength. He wants to address asymmetries in America's trade relationships with other countries.
But clarity is missing in US policies. Sometimes it is said that these tariffs are being imposed to address national security concerns, creating pressure on countries like Canada and China to take strict action on major issues such as illegal immigration and the fentanyl drug crisis. At other times, it is claimed that the tariffs are being imposed to balance the trade deficit. Occasionally, it is argued that tariffs are being used to raise money for tax cuts for citizens in future. There is no clarity on why such disruption is being caused. Not only are the tariffs poorly calculated, but they are also being implemented poorly. A nuanced understanding of trade is missing, and an oversimplified approach is being followed. with aggressive policy decisions being made based on assumptions. The established trade order is being challenged by invoking emergency economic powers.
As a result, the US stock market is witnessing its worst performance since the 2020 COVID crisis. However, according to the Trump administration, this stock market decline is merely an adjustment process. He believes that soon, jobs and investments will return to the US and the world will stop behaving unfavorably towards America. According to Trump, tariffs will give the US the power to negotiate. He says it won't be easy, but the US will definitely win. Now, only time will tell whether the US actually wins this or not. But yes, there is no doubt that this process is going to be extremely difficult, both for US consumers and for the US government. US consumers will have to face economic distress in the short term, and the government will have to engage in intense negotiations with many countries and trading blocs. Further, the US government will likely face public discontent as well. Even if, through all this, the US gains greater access to foreign markets, this approach will not be considered very efficient. Nobody likes this kind of aggressive strategy. It undermines trust and leads to negative consequences in the long run. Ultimately, this will reduce the credibility of the US as a trading partner.
Due to this trust deficit, foreigners may consider reducing their contributions to the US Treasury. Excessive pressure could force countries to unite against the US. They might even consider challenging the dollar's status as the global reserve currency. Retaliation against US digital services could also follow. Mega US companies like Alphabet and Meta, which play an important role in America's innovation story, could be targeted. This could further bleed the US economy. The European Union has made it clear that they will not sit idle, they will hit back. It remains to be seen how long the Trump administration will downplay global reactions and economic damage while continuing with its hardline stance. Because the way things are moving, the threshold of Trump supporters may be reached soon. Then we may see Trump claiming victory and pulling back. In the worst case scenario, if Trump refuses to back down, it is also possible that the US Congress may have to step in and reclaim the power to impose tariffs from the Trump administration. They might put limits on the president's ability to act unilaterally. The more the US stock market crashes, the greater the pressure will be on Trump to adjust his dramatic tariff policy. According to Trump, his policies have put America in the driver's seat. That's fine, but one should also check, once in a while, where the car is headed.